Hello, I'm Kent. I'm just finishing up burnishing this bowl, and today we're going to talk about how to remove and shape the tenon. Okay, so you finished the bowl. You've got the exterior shaped, you've got the interior shaped, you've applied your finish, and you have this tenon left that needs to be removed and shaped. All right, so there's lots of different ways to do this. Let's talk about a couple of different ways we're not going to cover today. You could use a vacuum chuck. A vacuum chuck goes into the lathe, holds the bowl in place with a vacuum like this, and leaves this whole area exposed so we can work that area. I have a vacuum chuck. I use it occasionally, but the method I'm going to show you I use much more often. It's quick, simple, and does a great job. Another option is a coal chuck. Coal chuck is like the big disc that has the nubs around the side, and it grips a bowl from the outside rim, okay? I don't even own one of those. I actually did once, and I really wasn't happy with it. Plus, I do a lot of natural edge bowls that have such a irregular shape. There's no way to easily mount those to coal chucks. But if you want, you could use coal chuck, and this bowl is actually designed pretty well for it because the little nubs have undercut angles, so the nubs would actually grip the edge of this pretty well and hold it in place. So if you have a coal chuck, you could use a coal chuck like that. And that leaves the base all completely exposed for you to shape and form however you'd like. But the method I'm going to show you today is with the jam chuck. The jam chuck, if you recall in one of the other videos, I'll put a link right here so you can go check that out if you'd like. The jam chuck is a simple tool that you can use that basically is used to hold and pin the bowl in place with the tailstock. Let's go ahead and put that together and let me show you with one of the jam chucks I've created. Okay, so we're going to use a jam chuck to mount this bowl end to end to be able to work on the base of the bowl. A jam chuck you can make very easily with a piece of scrap wood. Keep in mind that if you're using wood that has moisture in it still, that over time it's going to distort a bit and it may wobble. So you can just simply put that back on the chuck and just straighten out, just turn the curve of the outside of it so it's nice and smooth, and when it rotates, it should look very balanced. If it's not, it's going to create a wobble in the bowl. So just smooth that out, make sure that's good and round. Now, in the past, I've typically used a piece of padding between the jam chuck and the bowl, but what I'm discovering is the different paddings will compress in different areas, and they will add to an irregular surface and imbalance with the bowl. So a lot of times, I just like to come up here and put this directly onto the jam chuck. And by the way, if you're looking at this bowl and you seem to recognize that wormhole that's going through here, yes, this is the bowl that was turned in the live, almost live, video that you can find on my channel. And this bowl is going to be given away in July. So go check out that video to find out how you can win this bowl. Now, the other aspect when we're creating a tenon is we want to make a little mark here. It's kind of a register mark where the center is. And that's a really important thing to do when you shape your tenon. Also, I have a video on how to make a tenon, and I show you how to do that there. So let me put a link up there for you to see that video as well in case you haven't seen that yet. So I'm going to line up that little center point with the tailstock point, and it's looking like it's registering really well there. Let's take a look. I'm going to turn the lathe on. Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, now for some reason you get a big wobble in your piece. What you can do is you can actually check by holding your thumb on the tool rest and keep it in one place. You can find where there's a high spot on the rim. And when you feel a high spot, bring that high spot to the top, loosen up your tailstock just a little bit, lower the bowl down, and then snug the tailstock up. You don't have to tighten it real tight necessarily at first, just go slow with it. Before we jump into actually shaping this, let's talk about the base of the bowl just a little bit. All right, so if you recall, when we make a tenon, or the way I like to make a tenon is I actually add a shoulder to it. And what's nice about that shoulder is it gives me a little bit of leeway as far as how I'm going to shape the foot on this. That shoulder area is going to be removed, and we're going to do that right now. I do a lot of shaping of the foot of the bowl because I like to have that kind of that artistic flexibility to do that. If you've made a really shallow tenon without a shoulder, you may not have that ability, okay? And if it works, there's nothing wrong with that. There are tons of people that turn with a relatively cylindrical tenon that they simply grip to the chuck. And when they're done turning it, at this point, they're done. And they just leave that flat tenon as their base of the bowl. Richard Raffin does this. Richard Raffin also uses step jaw chucks, which have many different fittings. So he can fit the tenon very close to the same diameter as the cylinder that he makes there. So it doesn't really scratch up or do any damage around the sides. I prefer the more dramatic dovetail jaws because they really grip. And I typically make my tenons just a little bit bigger than those, so I'll get little indentations in that. And as far as I'm concerned, that tenon is nowhere near being finished, and I want this to look a lot better. Now, all of the practical stuff aside, design-wise, I like to look at proportions. And when we first make bowls, I mean, I remember my first bowls, and you probably do too. If you're just starting out, there's nothing wrong with this, but it's real common to have a bowl this size with a base that's almost the size as the rim. And there's nothing wrong with that. But aesthetically, if you start looking at the bowls that have a nice feel to them, that look just really dramatic, is you have a contrast between sizes, between the size of the foot and the overall size of the bowl. I like to keep my foot small, okay, because it accentuates the bowl and basically lets the bowl stand out. So in a case like this, there's a couple of different rules of thumb. Like one is thirds. If you use a rule of thirds, which is actually similar to photography, and it has to do with the golden mean, and you can really get into all kinds of different theories behind it. But essentially, if the base is 1/3 of the total width, so if you take the whole diameter of this, actually, let's grab a tape measure. Now, I don't measure this typically, but I'm going to do this just for example's sake right now. So this is coming across at 9.5 inches. So essentially a third of that's going to be about a 3 3/16 of an inch. Now, like I said, I do this by eye, and when it feels right, when I'm turning it, and what we're going to do next, it doesn't have to be measured exactly. But if you look at what's down here now, this is, when I said 3 3/16, this is about 3.5 inches wide. The tenon, the shoulder is 4 1/4 inches wide. So if it's a third, it's going to be smaller than this tenon. I know right now that I'm probably going to make it smaller than that. I'm probably going to make the foot of this 1/4 to sometimes I make it 1/5 of the total dimension of the rim. This is just my preference, and it's the way I like to turn these. You can do whatever you like. Now, also, if you're just starting off, making the shape of this and cleaning up the edge of that and having a nice flat bottom can be just perfect. And trust me, when you're able to turn a bowl and it looks like a bowl and you get that nice flat bottom on there and it sits okay, then you've made a bowl, and just be happy with that. Now, as you advance and you want to get more detailed with it, you can do things like make the shape of that foot hollowed out so that the rim, interior rim, is the same diameter or same thickness as your wall thickness, and that's what we're going to do today. So enough talking about design and theories. Let's put this back on the lathe and get to turning. The first thing I need to do is, I know that I'm going to remove and reduce this shoulder, and I'm going to have this tenon is going to be narrower than what's there right now. I don't want to make push cuts going across this way because I'm putting pressure, pushing the bowl off of the jam chuck. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do push cuts going into the headstock direction, so it's going to help keep that in line with the headstock. Now I'm going to do a couple push cuts to remove that area and to start shaping it, and then I'm going to take this newfound area and match the curve into the side. Let's take a look at this. I want to make these push cuts directly in at a 90-degree angle into the wood itself. If I go in and I have it turned at all, I'm probably going to get a skip back from the bull gouge. This is a 1/2 inch bull gouge with a 3/8 inch flute. Okay, so now I've got the general shape of the foot that I like. I'm going to go ahead and put a flat cut across the bottom so that I've got a nice smooth edge where this is going to sit on the table. And I'll actually direct this inward just a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to come back to this area where the shoulder and the base of the outside of the tenon was, and now I have to merge that into the curve of the bowl. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use a scraping cut and then a shear scrape. So I'm going to move the tool rest over just a touch, and I'm going to start making a scraping cut until I see that this curve is matching in with everything else that's going on with the bowl. Okay, that's pretty close, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a shear scrape, which is the handles down on my hip, and I'm only using the bottom edge of the bowl gouge to basically shave that material. That's going to give me a really nice smooth finish, and it's going to blend this new area into the existing area. You know you're getting a really good shear scrape when you have super fine shavings coming off like this. Little angel hair shavings is what they're called. Let's take a look at this. Okay, there's a little bit of a high spot here because we have the bowl isn't 100% centered here, but it's a little bit of a high spot. No big deal. That'll sand right out. And I'm going to work that a little bit more and smooth it out a bit more, and I'm going to take this edge down just a touch more. Okay, that's feeling really good. All right, excellent. And like I said, I'm going to take that edge down. Okay, if you're first starting off, and you've made this bottom relatively flat and smooth, and you're feeling comfortable with it and you don't want to go any farther, you know what? There's no problem with that. You can stop right now, sand this center area where there's a little bit of a hole from the tailstock, and you can be completely done at this point. Now, if you're a little more advanced and you want to take this a step further, what you can do is we can lower the inside of this to match the curve of the bottom of the bowl. And the idea is to make the thickness of the feet, or this rim that's going to be here, the same wall thickness as the bowl itself. And that's what we're going to do. And again, I'm still using the same 1/2-inch bowl gouge. I'm going to do some really light cuts here. And these are a little bit more advanced. So I'm going to basically be making like a pull scrape cut. And I've got to make sure that I'm not getting too much material into the bowl gouge at any one time so it doesn't catch. And I'll show you what that looks like. So first I'd like to start off with a kind of a scoop to the middle that shows me the lower part of where this is going to be. Now, it may be hard to see from that angle, but I'm looking down at the curve of the bowl, and the curve's going to go through here, and it's going to be about where the base of this cylinder is right now. That works good, except I have this really thick rim now. So the way I make this thinner is I start making pull cuts out to the rim. Okay, so now the pull cuts are going to be the bottom edge of this bowl gouge only is what's making the cut here. And I've got to make sure I'm not getting too much material all at once. So I'm going to make little nibbles. I'm just pulling the bowl gouge back towards the foot. Okay, so there I'm getting down. I'm almost down as low as I want to get. I'm going to define the rim here. And I can tell that in the center here there's a hump. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a very open flute cut. Now, if you're a beginner, I recommend not doing this because it's really easy to get a big catch like this. The trick is we're using very fine motor muscle skills, and I'm only cutting a very small amount at a time on a small portion of the bull gouge blade. If I engage too much of this blade, I'm going to get a nasty catch. So what I'm doing is I'm following the curve at the bottom of the bull here. And I've got a little bit of a hump here. I'm going to go back and scrape that with the tip. Now these are obviously not supported cuts, so there's going to be some tool marks there. Try this one more time. Come back out. There's the cut I was looking for. That curve is basically mimicking the interior inside curve. Now, all I need to do is take the cylinder and start reducing it. This is a push cut straight into the headstock. Now let's take a look at this. At this point, you have this very fine location where the tailstock is touching and holding on to the bull itself. Also, this is a great time to do any finish sanding. Like I've got a little bit of a rough area here, so I'm going to grab some sandpaper and I'm just going to touch that up real fast while I've got it on the lathe. It's a lot easier to sand here. All right. So what I need to do, what I'm working on now, is I'm going to reduce this cylinder and I'm going to shape the bottom of the curve of the bull here. Now the way I'm going to finish this up is with a spindle gouge, the spindle detail gouge. This is a small 3/8 inch spindle detail gouge. And I'm going to come in here, I'm going to start up at the top because this is where I can work into that location, and I'm going to cut into that middle portion. Letting the bevel touch first and then bring it in and cut. Okay, and then I can come back here. It's a little low actually, should bring that up a touch. And I'm going to make undercuts. And then I'll keep clearing that material out. Now right here is a huge advantage of the vacuum chuck and or the coal jaws, because this whole bottom is completely exposed and you can make that cut right up to the center and be done with it. With the tailstock here, obviously we have to work around that tailstock. So now, if you're just getting started out and you got it this far, you could stop here, take it off the lathe and use a knife and trim that off of there and then sand that surface and you'd be done. But you can also take it a little bit farther and keep making this wedge smaller. And come back in. Okay, now a little trick here, and this is a little more advanced, so don't try this if you're just starting off, but what I'm going to do is I'm basically putting pressure straight in to make a cut. I'm powering off the lathe and then I'm pushing even more in there. And you can rotate this a little bit until the tailstock disengages right there. And you basically turn that off with just a minimal nub and you have a little piece in your tailstock there. So that's essentially it. Now we're going to, I'm going to use a piece of sandpaper here. You can either power sand this little area or just work it with some sandpaper and get it nice and smooth. And that is your foot. And you just apply some finish to match the rest of the finish that you have on the bowl, and you're done. Now look at that foot compared to what we had earlier with the big tenon sitting there. See how it's much more elegant this is? Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, so why not just use a small tenon like that and then you don't have to shape all of that? Well, with a bowl this size and a tenon that small, you're not going to have real good stability through the process of shaping the exterior and coring out the interior. You're going to be better off with a larger tenon. It's going to give you much more stability and strength to hold the bowl. And afterwards, you can take that tenon stock and that tenon area and use it to shape the foot the way you want. So that's how you remove a tenon from a bowl. One of the ways you can remove a tenon from a bowl, but it's the way I like to use frequently. And I don't know, you tell me what you think. Leave me a comment at the bottom of this video and tell me if you take your tenon off like this. And if you don't currently, maybe you'll think about trying it now. If you're not already subscribing, do me a huge favor and click that subscribe button down below and subscribe. If you've liked this video and you've learned something from it, do me a huge favor. Click the like button and leave me a comment below and tell me what you learned and what kind of surprised you or what you're going to try next time you turn a bowl. I always love hearing from you, and I read every single comment from every video. Thank you so much for those, by the way. And until next time, as always, happy turning.